The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm Stephen Sakash here again with my co-host Tulio Siragusa and our special guest today. And so we're going to talk about emotional intelligence, and it's increasingly recognized as a competitive advantage in business. According to Talent Smart research, 90% of top performers score high in emotional intelligence. And the World Economic Forum consistently ranks emotional intelligence among the most in-demand workplace skills. So today, we explore what it means to redefine success from the inside out and why emotional intelligence may be the key to building performance that does not come at the expense of well-being. And Tulio, why don't you kick us off here and introduce our guest today? You'll have to hit that unmute button, though, before we get...
Yes. Okay, so I was going to test to see if everybody could read my lips. So we're excited today to have Chelsea Espinoza. She's the founder and CEO of Road to Jubilee and a quality of life coach, consultant and speaker. With a background spanning 20 years in executive leadership and interior design, Chelsea understands the pressures of high performance environments and the personal cost of ignoring emotional, mental, and physical well-being. She partners with driven professional women and forward-thinking organizations to redefine what success looks like from the inside out. Her work challenges outdated systems that reward exhaustion and instead centers on a radical idea. True success is quality of life. Through her coaching, Chelsea helps women question invisible rules, reset boundaries, and redesign how they show up. So success is no longer built on overextension, but on emotional intelligence and self-trust. Chelsea, welcome to the Bliss Business Podcast. I'm so excited to have someone who is the anti-hustle culture on the show.
That is me. Even though I do hustle, it's about figuring a little bit more out of how to balance our hustle. So yeah. I come to you first as a human, and second as someone who has been in the workforce since I was 15. I come from a family of workers, of small business owners who really invested the thought of being a good, hard worker. So when I was a teenager, it was just not even an option for me not to find a job. And I remember when I was 15, I lied on one of my first job applications because I wanted to go to work for a large retail corporation, and I wasn't old enough. And I was that girl in high school that showed up with my heels on and my cute little outfits on because after school I was going to go to work. I had my cute little briefcase and everything. So nice. I started out really early in the workforce. And subsequently, I went to college, went to interior design school, and I became a designer, but not before I became a single mom. And I ended up being a mother and a father to a young person that I was 100% responsible for. And so interior design ended up being this place where I could create a flexible schedule, unlike I could if I was just working in an office or a typical corporate company. And so what I found was the beauty in working with other moms whose kids were in school. I would have this kind of schedule where I'd take my daughter to school, I'd pick her up and do her homework with her. I was working, she'd have her snack, I'd be working. Sometimes after she went to bed, I'd be working. But it was a really important, crucial thing that I needed to incorporate into to balance, for lack of a better word, to find harmony in my work life and my personal needs. So fast forward a couple years, I get married and we become a family of two and to a family of six. And at the time, yeah, at the time I owned my own company and I thought, oh my gosh, this is not, not sustainable. I can't own a company and run a family. When I got married, my stepkids were all teenagers and my daughter was 10. So I decided to join a firm, and in that firm is where I grew significantly in my skill set, in my customer interactions, in dynamics like husband and wife, and I ended up becoming an accomplished communicator. So because I was not only creating interiors for people, I was navigating these complex dynamics between husband and wife, decision makers. And what did that look like? Was that the husband? Was that the wife? Who held the financial strings? And, all working around what people liked and disliked in their own home. And often I became a mediator into the couple dynamics.
I bet.
So I'm in this process of not only having my own life behind the scenes, navigating all these dynamics, I had it at work too. And at this time is where I really began to hone my craft as a visionary and in improving systems, not only the systems at work, but in the firm that I was working with and for, and in my family. And so, yeah.
I want to dive into the system stuff, all that stuff. That's really where I like to geek out sometimes too. So, I think you mentioned that many women succeed inside systems that were never designed with their well-being in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of walk through what's that look like, and then we can kind of transition to how emotional intelligence kind of plays a role in a shift in that dynamic. But
when I was thinking about this before coming on here, I can't answer this question without really identifying that our systems were never created for a workforce. Our systems were created for profit. And so to even bring up this idea of what kind of systems can we implement, we first need to acknowledge and be aware of that's the game that we're playing against. Mm-hmm. And so systems really require firsthand an awareness of what we are really trying to create change in, and taking into account what our workforce needs. It almost feels a little bit counterintuitive. So some of those workforce, implements and structures that can be implemented are ones that really take into account the holistic approach to what we're doing and where we want to go.
And you talk about like the systems, they aren't designed for really a lot of times for human systems is what the problem is. You've got these other systems and now we got human systems thrown in the middle of it. Right. Yes. And it's like, they're just, the systems are kind of designed to plug someone in. And if it gets churned or burned out or whatever, build someone else new in that.
Right. We are part of the production. We are the product. And that it doesn't matter how long it takes, no matter whether it needs to be faster, it needs to be more efficient. And it's really about, when it's about bottom line, that's what we're going to get. We're going to get these kind of structures and infrastructures that follow that.
Yeah, I was mentioning to Tulio, who's still on mute again, but no, I was mentioning Tulio, I think one of the most like consequential leadership questions is and will be, who are people becoming when they spend their lives inside our systems, right? And we just don't really ask that. Well, we do, but society, we don't really.
Yeah, and the systems can generate great results or not so great either. And in fact, when a bunch of us co-founded radicalpurpose.org, we asked that big question. It's like, are people's needs actually being met? And they aren't. And the idea of even talking about needs is not even in the equation. And part of it is because we've also inherited a lot of the Industrial Revolution systems, right? That being applied into the knowledge space, which doesn't work. So, but I want to go back to this center a little bit on the fact that you're a quality of life coach. So your work, in fact, centers around that true success is really about having quality of life. And nobody talks about that enough. I mean, it's so important, right? I often say, like, what's the point of being singly dimensional if you're just going to be successful in one area, but then not in the other areas of your life? Are you really having a quality life? So how do you help leaders measure something that feels like deeply personal, but also has professional consequences? Some people believe if I give 100% to this business and I'm an entrepreneur, this is my life, right? And they will sacrifice family, friends, health, all these other things. But is that really quality of life? So how do you help people measure that?
Yes.
It's a very personal thing for people, different things, right?
That's what I love about quality of life, because I can ask you, Tulio, and I can ask you, Stephen, what is quality of life to you? And you will both have different answers, but they will all be deeply meaningful to you and something that you want to place as a priority, right? So that's what we do. that's what I do is I help people start where we are. What's important to you? How are you living in this currently? And where do you need to get to so that you can actually implement these practices, and their practices, into our everyday life? And once we start living and operating in our own form of quality of life, we have an appreciation for other people as they are seeking to live their own, because we're doing it. And that's empathy. We're able to see and feel and understand what other people might want or need. I have an interesting fact. So I just read this Forbes article that last year in 2025, over 455,000 women left the workforce. And the reason that they cited their leaving was because of lack of childcare. If we go deeper into what lack of childcare looks like, it's really not having infrastructures and systems in place that are supporting women exactly where we are as being the primary caretakers. For the most part, we are the primary caretakers of our children, whether or not we're married, right? And so to be able to talk about quality of life, it's getting us out of what I have found pretty consistently is getting us out of this place of being in survival mode and making sure that we can thrive in our lives and systems that we participate and we end up giving our all to. Tulio, you made this really good point of, we have this opportunity to in our work life to give everything, but it's usually to a system that doesn't give back to us. I mean, we get paid and we can pay our bills and we can have a lifestyle, but does it pay in quality of life?
And I think we're also, especially women, are bombarded today with these ideas that often when you pursue them, you find yourself getting to the top of the pinnacle of success and realizing this isn't what it was cracked up to be. Even executives, doesn't matter what sex you are, for many years we're sold this idea: you climb the ladder, you get to the top, and there's freedom there, only to discover it's very lonely. And there is no freedom there. It's
right.
Quite the opposite. And then also you end up being this duplicitous kind of person where you have to put on a mask at the office and you get to take it off at home. Sometimes you get to take it off at home and you bring the mask at home with you. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
And so I think women have been sold something that when they get there, it's like exhausting, So how do you help someone reconnect with what actually quality of life mean? Because it might mean something that someone is striving towards, some aspirational version of what that might be, because it's being pitched over and over and you believe it. But then when you get there, it's not all cracked up to be what you thought it would be. So how do you help?
Yeah.
How do you help kind of bring reality to it too? Because I think there's a lot of that going on too.
Yeah, I always say as women, we spin all the hats. We spin all the plates, we wear all the hats, and there's so much that goes on behind the scenes. And very often we put others' needs before our own. And so the thing that I recommend is very counterintuitive, which is to pause. Really take a moment to assess and reflect on what's working and what's not working. Because very often we are in this perpetual motion. We know something's not working. We know that this pace is not sustainable. We understand that there's frustration and we're losing connection with ourselves, with our bodies, with our relationships. We just don't know what to do to step out of it. And so the very first thing that I promote is pausing and taking a moment to reflect. Because in order to create change, true lasting change, we need what I call 3 ingredients, but there's a 3.1. So in order to create true lasting change, we need to have first an awareness, right? And the second we need to have is growth. So change cannot be really lasting change cannot be achieved without those 2 things. But growth requires practice. So without this first step of awareness, achieving true and lasting change and all those other ingredients can't be achieved.
So wait, we got awareness, we got growth. And what was the third?
Practice.
And then practice. And you said 3.1? What was the...
Well, the 3.1 is the practice, because I operate out of the 3. Awareness plus growth equals change. And then I kind of throw in that, okay, but how do we get change? We practice. Right. And some people call it habits. I call it practice. It's a little bit less overwhelming.
I love it. So Harvard Business Review has reported that leaders who demonstrate empathy and emotional awareness build stronger trust and more resilient teams. We know this. So in your work with professional women and organizations, what systems need to be in place for emotional intelligence to move from personal insight to this organizational practice? We love pulling out systems ideas and things like that. So anything you've got here related to that, we want to hear.
Well, first of all, a system that involves leadership. And I mean leadership that is decision makers and the people who are in power. It needs to come from the top. And the leadership needs to be actually 100% wholehearted in this idea for the systems to actually be effective. And then from there, it really depends on the culture of the workplace. You know, in landscape construction, it looks differently than it does in design. In corporate, it looks different than it does in a small business. So first and foremost, before I even consider what kind of systems to implement, is the heartbeat and the understanding of the leadership, the ownership, the decision-making people, and then going from there. But if I was going to name a system, I would say one that really gets our head wrapped around, that our bottom line might look a little bit different when we operate under these systems. Our profits might look different. Our success might be redefined. If we're defining our company as successful as lower employee overturn, which ultimately helps us to increase our profits because we're not spending so much money on replacing employees, that's one thing. But really having an understanding and a heartbeat for what our workforce and our work culture needs is a really good starting place.
You kind of mentioned, that kind of the metric of like churn, really if you go from, it's really starting to make that shift from going from that sole pursuit, all your metrics are, focused on profit, right? And then it's like, okay, well, what about your people metrics? What kind of people metrics do you have? So then you get into things like, how can we improve, our retention? And then you've got, if you really start to get empathetic, you start thinking about your community and your environment and all that. And it's like, okay, so we've got profit, people, and then what about the planet? What about our community that we're in?
Right.
So
it really, we almost have to start thinking like a B Corp structure. And the majority of companies in our country, over like 33 million, are a regular corp, L Corp, LLC, S Corp, C Corp. There's about 200,000 B Corps. And B Corps really have that kind of structure built in and interwoven into what their parameters are to be qualifying for a B Corp. Just a thought.
Yeah. Now, so I think we talk a lot about the role, purpose, place, and we'll get to that in just a few minutes. But I think people, if they understand the purpose behind something, like there's nothing wrong with making profits if it's intentionally and purposeful towards something other than shareholder value, right? Maybe it's, we want to make an impact on the community and everybody's bought into the impact we're going to make in the community. You need money to make an impact. Well, then it becomes more purposeful to actually grow versus we just need to satisfy investors who are just hungry for profits, right? And this is where I think often exhaustion comes into the picture, because people being pushed towards growth, shareholder value, and they're being expected to get behind it when in reality they don't connect to it, right? So when organizations reward exhaustion, like they just push hard, and it's funny, I used to joke around this when I was a lot younger. I traveled a lot and I worked very hard, and people be like, when do you rest? I'm like, I'll rest when I die. It was like the ongoing joke, but I look back now, I'm like, what a terrible way of being at that time. But I didn't know any better. I was following the pursuit of whatever, right?
So wasn't that like a t-shirt slogan? I'll rest when I die.
probably. But, but when you're rewarding this hustle, exhaustion, it becomes cultural. And so once it becomes culture, it's very difficult to survive in that environment if that's not how you're wired. So what practical shifts can leaders make to redesign how success is defined and reinforced? What role do you think like purpose plays in all this? And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I was just curious to get your opinion on this. How do we help them redefine this? Because
again, it starts with us. It starts with our own interpersonal growth It starts with our perspective of even seeing that the dynamics and the culture is created in this way is a huge win. Most people aren't looking at it like that. Too many of us are operating in survival mode. Too many of us are operating in there's not enough. If we were to change our ideals and our identities to there's more than enough, we just need to figure out how to implement it into places. And I know you keep asking me about what systems can be in place. And so my mindset is actually, I think, the best system that we can start with is the mindset first, because we're not going to be able to create pathways without these ideas first and these awarenesses.
Something to think about is kind of, I want to talk about like what signals show when a system is emotionally unhealthy. What do you think kind of pops up in your mind when you think about that?
There's a lot of signs that we overlook all the time. One of them is, are we excited to go to work? Are we excited for our day? Are we excited to interact with our team? Are we pushing down a lot of our emotions? Do we find ourselves angry, frustrated? Are we excited for, oh my gosh, I have this team meeting today and my team is so synergetic? Or do we find out when we're in this team meeting that it's like herding cats and we're definitely not all on the same page?
I think everyone right now is feeling all these negatives that you're saying, like that's because that's 70% of the workworkforce. We already know it's like that.
Which,
maybe
honestly, Stephen, it was so refreshing when I met one of the staff of your company, and she was like, "I love where I work." I'm like, really? I don't see that very often, and singing the praises of the culture that you have created. And I know this isn't about promoting that, but it was very refreshing, and you can definitely create a change exactly from where you are. I think that's evidence of what I'm saying.
Yeah, I love sometimes when we like switch it and pull out, okay, what are the negative traits and things like that? Because then people just suddenly start, you're hearing all this and you're like checking off the box. Yep. That's my freaking Tuesday morning.
Right. We're in push through culture. It's a job. I mean, I'm paying my bills. I don't like it, but I just have to do it so I can get to fill in the blank. And that's for our own ownership. Are we participating in push through culture?
And it really does make a big difference that, like you said, like just that change in attitude about your team and everything. And even if you're feeling the stress, but then if you just think about it, hey, you know what? I actually love my team, or I love this, that. Just start thinking that way and you'll feel that shift and you'll feel that kind of that energy come back to you.
Yeah.
And
that's
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Well, that's, to me, a really good word descriptive of how we can be effective leaders. When we're talking about leaders, it's not just being a decision maker and it's not just being the person in power. It's the person that's cultivating the people that are around us, really deciding what kind of temperature do we want in this room? Are we relaying the big picture and making sure that people have what they need to support this big picture? And that's where the structure really starts coming into play. But if we're not asking ourselves these questions, we will miss it.
Yeah. And those are very purposeful questions. And we're going to get to that next. But we have a couple of questions from the audience. So let's start with the first one. Sometimes, as on YouTube, sometimes people are so used to being tired that they don't even realize they're burning out. What is one hidden red flag that tells us our emotional intelligence is slipping and we need to reset? Great question.
Great question. One of the things, and this is the first thing that came to mind, how often are we popping ibuprofen because our head hurts? A lot of the times our body is telling us things that we're not paying attention to. And we push through. I have a migraine. I'm sick a lot. And so being in touch a little bit more and in tune with what's going on in our body and not treating it like, oh, body, you're betraying me. I have something that I need to get done. Why aren't you working with me? Our body is going, woo, woo, hello. There's something else going on. And it does require emotional intelligence to really pause, take a moment to assess. And then really it's a process of unbraiding.
That I know that feeling because I've gone through it, I don't know how many years ago, but we're kind of went through this exercise, but we're carrying around with us this little bit of weight like on our shoulders that we just don't feel that's there. But until you go to kind of some sort of awareness exercise of some type where you're just like, holy crap, I'm just carrying this around with me all the time, right?
Yeah. And it's important to know what is the difference between a busy season or a busy lifestyle. And so a busy season is something we've got, campaigns that are going out and deadlines and things that we need to be at Christmas. I always roll my eyes at Christmas because like that is a busy season, right? But then we also have the busy lifestyle, which is there's really no stop of the pace. And unfortunately, a lot of our culture is operating in both busy season and busy lifestyle. And that's what our body will respond to over time. That's what our relationships will respond to over time. And our overall quality of life will feel lacking over time.
All right. We got 2 more questions. I think the first one is on YouTube from one of our team members. How do you distinguish versus normal work versus anxiety, bad work anxiety in terms of quality of life? Sorry, I'm trying to make.
So the example I love to give is it's situational anxiety. I'm going to give a presentation and I feel nervous and I feel anxious. I feel adrenaline. That I would say would be normal work anxiety. Bad work anxiety is something that keeps coming up over and over and over, where you think about going to work, Sunday scaries. That's a bad work anxiety. And and when we think about it a little bit differently, is it, I don't want to be in the dynamic that I'm in at work, or my boss is going to blah, 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 blah at work, or this employee is really not working with me, versus I have so much to do this week. I just feel anxiety about the workload or just this thing coming up.
Yeah, I often say I'm so excited to get all this work done. I got a lot of work done versus I can't wait to be done with this. That's the best.
Yes. So for instance, I had a little bit of anxiety and jitters about coming on here, but I knew it was just about this. It wasn't about, oh gosh, I have to meet with Stephen and Tulio.
Here's another. Yeah. Okay. We got another question. This is from a team member, Anna. Is there an example on a daily ritual or morning routine you would recommend for someone wanting to improve their quality of life? Great question. Thank you, Anna.
Yeah. A daily ritual I recommend is to create a little bit of space to be introspective. That's one of them. Another one is kind of broaden our spectrum to who are our supportive people in our lives. A lot of us that are on this path, we don't have enough community. And so to be able to put ourselves in a position where we are linking arms with others and that can offer us perspectives that we might not otherwise have, whether it's support or perspectives or, oh yeah, that's just this, but, or, oh yeah, that's this type thing. So that putting that in a daily ritual, I'm not sure how to do that, but the first thing would be to create space to have those moments of pausing and introspection.
Thank you. All right, let's get to the purpose question. We've been teasing it long enough. Deloitte research shows that purpose-driven organizations experience higher level of employee engagement and loyalty. And it's not just Deloitte. There's other studies that have been done from Gallup and even McKinsey. Now, from your perspective, how does like emotional intelligence connect to purpose in a way that helps transform both the individual career and the company culture? How important is emotional intelligence in achieving a purposeful, intentional organization?
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about emotional intelligence as the ability to recognize and understand other people's emotions, our own emotions, and how to regulate them, it's crucial. I think it's a foundation to this, because when we're talking about purpose-driven organizations, we're also talking about big picture minded. We're not just talking about what's before us. We're talking about things, people that are important in the bigger picture. And I also see purpose as more community minded, more, and we can't have community. We can't be in community in a healthy way without emotional intelligence. Right.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
I was going to say, adding to that, like a lot of purpose is really how you're in service to other people. So emotional intelligence, I mean, they kind of go hand in hand, right?
Well, yes and no, because I've met a lot of people who are about helping people, and they haven't really honed their craft of being emotionally intelligent. They're meeting a need, right? So it is very important to be effective.
Yep.
Big picture minded.
Yep, for sure. So what happens to like innovation and long-term performance when leaders prioritize quality of life?
Well, first, there's a lot more enjoyment.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more enjoyment within their own life, their own experience. And like I mentioned earlier, it's when we operate under that premise, we appreciate fostering that in the people that are around us. That's one of the joys that I've gotten out of becoming a quality of life purveyor and speaker and promoter, that, I want you to have quality of life because I have found it. I have gone through all the hardships and I know what it's like to live on the other side. And it's really, woo, everybody needs this, right? That's kind of where I come from. The joy that comes from this is infectious, and I want to share it with more people. And I think in leadership, as we are experiencing that too, we want that for the people that are around us and that we're surrounding ourselves with.
Go ahead, Taylor.
I'm curious. I want to see the tie into this, because you have an interesting perspective, also being someone who's got experience as an interior designer. Like, how does that experience influence your perspective on leadership environments? I'm very curious how those tie in together.
Oh, wow. Yes. Great question. I always say that as an interior designer, I did so much more than designing, right? I was mentioning the dynamics between husband and wife and making something look good and getting all my ideas from here out of here and really becoming a visionary, seeing something that exists before it actually is in fruition, finding a space or even an infrastructure that is a diamond in the rough and figuring out how to bring that to the best of its ability. That was a lot of my job as an interior designer. But not only that, it was working with a team. I was a project manager. You give your money to me and I'm going to go ahead and create this beautiful revised space in your home, but I need a team of people to do it. And I needed to attract a team that would do what they said what they were going to do, when they said they were going to do it, how they were going to do it. Also show up. I needed to manage that team. I one time had a wallpaper installer that was yelling with frustration because the wallpaper wasn't going straight in my client's home, right? And so I had to, we don't do that. I had to manage those people in a way that was fostering.
You didn't order angry wallpaper installer?
The wallpaper didn't put itself crooked by itself. You're putting it crooked just to bring it back to perspective.
Well, and also, yes, as you said.
What are you angry at?
There is a psychology to design. They don't teach you this stuff in school. There's a psychology to how a home makes you feel, about how much money you're spending on updating your home. There's so many different variables in this that really have helped. Okay, what was your question? I was pulling it together.
Don't worry about it. Go.
How interior design comes into play with leadership dynamics.
Yeah, and so within leadership dynamics, so you talk about having your hand in so many different variables that does have an end product goal. Yeah. You have to figure out how to really hone your craft beautifully so that people want to work with you again. Your clients, your workforce, your vendors all want to work with you. It's all about building relationships and being accountable and I have to do what I say that I'm going to do. So being the example, but also surrounding myself with people who are the example as well.
Yeah. I was personally interested in that because oddly enough, my whole life evolves around organizational design, but oddly enough, I have a secret skill. I'm a good interior designer. My wife and everybody's always like, you should do this. And so I'm like, no, I just see things in a way that on how things this space should flow in a way that's comfortable. And I'm wondering, wow, these two might be intertwined. So maybe a good tip would be, you want to be a good leader, good organizational designer, go learn interior design. It might go in time. It might be a good opportunity.
Well, it's one step deeper than that, because a lot of people have the gift, but it is another level of a gift when we work with the public, when we're working with relational dynamics.
How do you, on an interior design question still, if you want to really bring out something meaningful for people in the design, what do you go through in that process yourself to really bring out just something that's really meaningful to them and how you do your work?
So my process was always assessing a home. What do you want? What do you like? What you don't like? And then I would say, what are 3 words that you want to feel in your environment when we're done? And those were the 3 words that were my guiding post. And I would, when I would present things, I would make sure, well, people tell you things without even saying things like, oh yeah, it's fine. And then you hold up this one thing and they're like, oh my gosh, I love it. You know, people tell us without saying the exact words of yes and no.
I love
So
it.
that was always my focus.
So 3 words that you want to feel in your.
That's a good question we should ask at work too. Like, what do you want to feel being here? I mean, those are great questions. It's like I'm taking notes because I'm like, there's a lot of applicability for. I never connected the 2, but there is definitely a lot of connection to creating space, physical space at home. How about the space you're creating in the office? You know, sort of metaphysically speaking, of course. Interesting, very interesting. Lot to take in.
So one question we always ask every guest on the show is some form of this is, what role does love play in business, or should love play in business, do you think?
I think it should be forefront. We start with loving ourselves. We start with having a love and appreciation for who we are, who we're growing to be, how we are emotionally intelligent, but we're not always. We are always in a process. And from that place of having a love and appreciation for ourselves, we have the ability to extend that to other people. And kindness and joy and excitement around what we're doing is infectious.
I like that a lot. We talk a lot about the importance of that self-awareness, and we mention it in this show. So that can be a painful process for leaders and stuff, but you also have to, love yourself as you kind of go through that process, but also be humble because, we know you've got trauma from your childhood that we just need to make sure you're aware of, or you just bring it into that environment. You're hanging up wallpaper in there, and
just don't bring it to the office with you.
Okay, well, but you bring up a good point, because I think some of the things that are really worth considering when in our emotional intelligence process is that we don't show up as a different person at work. We are the person that we are. So those things are going to come out of us, no matter how hard we try to not be angry at the wallpaper, which is, it's a different issue, right? But that's the thing that's worth paying attention to, because it's going to seep out. And so emotional intelligence and empathy in the workplace is really having a hearty understanding that we cannot be one person at home and another person at work. Yes, we have game faces that we put on, but we are that same person, and that's who shows up.
Yeah, the loop is your identity. You cannot fake your identity. You can change it with some mantras, neuroscience. You can neuroplasticity redefine the loop, but it is there. You can't hide it. You can hide it for a while, but it comes out.
And coming back full circle to that, it's like thinking about the systems. Like, who are people becoming when they spend their lives inside our system, right? Yeah. And so that loop, we can reinforce these really negative behaviors depending on the system, and you will loop badly. We've talked about it, Tulio and I, going through different scandals and things like that, and all kinds of systems at work. And if the purpose isn't right, if there's no feedback in there, it's not a loving system. It's just going to loop and reinforce these bad traits.
And there isn't enough awareness to think about the impact that we have as leaders in an organization on society, because the experience you have, the environment you create, how people come out when they go home, how they talk about whether they enjoy their job or hate it with their kids, creates their perception of the future. And we need to elevate how we think about the impact we have beyond profits. We have an impact on society, on how society gets shaped, the way we treat people at work. So let's, one question we ask as we're wrapping up here, want to give something tangible for our listeners, something they could do this month, maybe even this week, right now. So for those listening, maybe they feel trapped a little bit in a high pressure system. Like I'm in a hustle culture environment. I can't do anything about it. Right. So maybe what's one boundary or mindset shift they can implement this week?
Oh my gosh, you're going to. So this is a funny one. This is step away from your desk and move your body. That's going to reveal a lot to you. That is going to be revealing how much you resist stopping the pace or how excited you are to get away from it. It's also going to help you bring some oxygen to the flow of your blood. I can't say it. It's also going to get more oxygen to your brain. And so the easiest, simplest thing that you can do is literally step away from your desk, step away from what you're doing, and move your body. I like to do timers. I'll do 50 minutes of intentional and intense work, and then 10 minutes of step up, step away, move around, get my mind on something else before I get back to it. It sounds really simple, but it's very powerful.
Nice.
Very good.
So, so people want to learn about you, get to know you, connect with you. What's the best way they can do that?
You can find me on my website, roadtojubilee.com. I also have a YouTube channel, Road to Jubilee. And on there, I have my own little podcast where I talk to women about quality of life. And I interview everyday successful women. And I ask them, what's quality of life to you? Where are you challenged? How do you live it out? And then we talk about some just basically great topics, whatever we want to talk about. I also have an Instagram channel that I just give this is how I'm living my quality of life. It's kind of a fun, entertaining, get to know me type thing and let us think outside the box. And then I have a webinar coming up, which we're talking about burnout and what is burnout exactly, how to avoid it, how to see the signs. And that's coming up on March 26th. And you can find that on my website under the events and register for that. It's a free workshop. There's a lot of valuable information in there, especially for those of us who are in this push through hustle culture and really not in touch with, we feel burnout a lot, right? But really a lot of times what we're feeling are the pre-burnout signs, which are fatigue and overwhelm. So I help give us some tools and strategies and awarenesses on how to really avoid burnout, because the worst kind of burnout is something that I had, which was physical burnout, where our bodies shut down. So I'm excited to have that event, and that's how you can find me.
All right. I love it. Chelsea, thank you for coming on the show today and, challenging, again, people to redefine their success, with some new lens on life. And to our listeners, thank you for the great questions. And, as we wrap this show up, do that one thing. Get up off your desk and stretch out and and evaluate.
Move your body.
Yep. All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time on the Bliss Business Podcast.
Thank you.